Good morning, Grow Your Future students. We are today going to talk about formatting your CV in this short video. So we will make a start. So one of the things that we get asked a lot about is formatting your CV. And the key thing with this is making a good impression and especially a good first impression. So there are a few key things you can do when it comes to formatting your CV to really make sure that that recruiter or that hiring manager carries on reading your document. Now, it's worth noting that CVs generally get scanned for about 6 to 10 seconds when they're first picked up. And because of this, formatting is really important so that you need to make sure that it looks professional, it's not complicated, and by doing so, the recruiter will carry on reading your CV. So, how can you make it stand out then? So what we would say is using a really simple and professional font. So try and not use something that's too difficult to read. We would encourage you to use font size of roughly 10 to 12, so slightly bigger for headings, but try and keep that font size a good readable sort of size. We would also encourage you to look at consistent spacing and alignment throughout. So what do we mean by that? We mean that the spacing between headings and the spacing between sections is all consistent, so similar throughout your document, and that it's all aligned properly. So you've not got dates in different places if you look along the chronological order. So really making sure that when you're looking at your CV, it looks professional, it looks like someone has read over it and thought quite thoughtfully about where they've placed things. And finally, being aware of white space. So the white space is the space on the page that isn't used by the words. It's really important to try and not completely overcram your CV so that there is no space on that document. You'll know yourself from when you're reading a document, if it's spaced appropriately, if there's not too many words on a page, it's much easier to read and process that information. So those are a few key formatting points that we would definitely encourage you to do. Another thing is the structure. So when it comes to formatting your CV, the structure can really make sure that your document is standing out. So this is just a suggested order in sections, and what I would say with CVs, and we would always say this in other videos and appointments, is that there's no particular right or wrong way of writing a CV. It is your marketing document, so you can choose what you want to do. These are just some recommendations that we would encourage you to think about. So in terms of the structure, we would definitely say to kind of put your name at the top, and your contact details. You don't need to put the title CV at the top. A personal profile. Some people prefer not to include this, but if you do, this is just a short summary of who you are, 2 to 3 lines max. And then you would look at including your education, your experience, skills, and any additional sections. So some for some roles you might want to focus a little bit more on projects. In that case, that you might want to include a project section. So like I said, they don't have to be in this order, but I think it's important to think about, have I included these sections or the detail within them within my CV? And again, just to emphasize, the consistency in headings and layout does matter, and it does show that you've put some thought into making your CV look professional. So getting your structure right can go a long way, like I've said. And here are some just final points really in terms of formatting. So what we would encourage you to do is focus on using bullet points instead of paragraphs. So just to flick back, if we say, for example, take the experience section. With the experience section, we would encourage you, if you're including part-time work, internships, placements, whatever that looks like for you, that when you're talking about each of those experiences, try and avoid using large blocks of text, so paragraphs, and focus on bullet points if you can. The bullet points can start with words like managed, developed, assisted, and we would call these action verbs. So they're allowing you to not only say what you did, but how you did it. So for example, managed really says a lot about the bullet point that you're talking about or including within your CV. So it's a clever way of kind of combining those two things. It also looks quite professional as well. So instead of saying I did this, you can say managed a group of volunteers as part of a leadership role, working for a local charity. So that's just an example. But try and do that if you can. It does sort of go a long way in looking professional. We would also say to try and not do more than 3 to 5 bullet points per section within your experiences. So like each per experience, we would say not more than 5, because really you want to kind of give enough space and time for all the things that you've done. So try not to focus too much on one particular bit of experience, by giving too much detail. You can also expand in your cover letter in your interview, so don't feel like you have to cover everything in your CV. It's just the key headline things that you want that employer or recruiter to know. Some final common formatting mistakes then. So trying to overcomplicate your CV, so using multiple fonts and colours. Like I said earlier, huge blocks of text can be quite off-putting. It's very hard to skim read text, and I think it's important to note that recruiters will be skim reading your CV, so they might not always have time to read every single word that you've written. They might do that initially and then read over it in more detail. So, but that first skim read, regardless, bullet points, short sentences can really help keep them engaged in what you've written. Again, inconsistent spacing, so try and keep that consistent throughout. So you've got your clear headers, your clear sections, and like I said, overly designed templates. So don't feel like you need to necessarily bring your creative energy to your CV. For some industries that is really good, but you don't necessarily have to make it stand out in terms of color and font and images, etc. What we really want with your CV is to keep it nice and simple, nice and concise and straightforward, so that the recruiter can get that information that they need. And finally, don't forget to tailor your CV to each role. This is really important. And there's a few short videos on CVs in a little bit more detail if you want to go back and look at them. Or please do book a careers appointment with the team, and we'd be happy to help you with that. Thank you.